I walked into the courtroom, the scent of industrial strength cleaner and stale anxiety hitting me like a wall. It's the same smell every day, the smell of bad decisions. My robe felt heavy, not with its own weight, but with the sheer volume of foolishness I was about to adjudicate. Bird handed me the case file. I glanced at the title, Dubois versus Henderson. The subject, a cake, a birthday cake. I almost laughed. Some days I feel like I'm running a daycare for adults who've forgotten how to use their words. I sat down, the leather of my chair groaning in protest, and looked at the two people standing before me. On the plaintiff's side was a woman who looked like she'd been assembled by a committee with bad taste. Her hair was a shade of blonde not found in nature. Her nails were long, claw-like things, and her face was pulled so tight she looked permanently surprised. This had to be Miss Tiffany Dubois. She had the unmistakable aura of someone who complains to the manager if the free bread isn't warm enough. On the defendant's side was a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. He had flour dust on his eyebrows and a look of pure, unadulterated bewilderment. Mr. Henderson, the baker. A man who probably got up at 4 a.m. to make an honest living, only to find himself in my courtroom because of a woman who probably thinks ballerina slipper is a legitimate color for a legal complaint. All right, I started, not wasting a second. Miss Dubois, you are suing Mr. Henderson for $5,000, the maximum. I looked down at the file, then back up at her, for a cake. Explain yourself, and make it quick. I have a stack of cases involving actual problems. She took a deep theatrical breath. Oh, here we go. Your Honor, she began, her voice quivering with manufactured outrage. This man, this baker, ruined my daughter's sweet 16. It was a complete and utter catastrophe. I stared at her, my face a mask of stone. A catastrophe. Was the cake poisoned? Did it explode? Did it leap off the table and attack the guests? What are we talking about here? The color, Your Honor! The color was all wrong! She shrieked, pointing an accusatory, talon-like finger at Mr. Henderson. I asked for a delicate blush ballerina slipper pink. What he delivered was a garish, disgusting Pepto-Bismol pink. It was hideous. It clashed with the decor, the lighting, my daughter's dress. It destroyed the entire aesthetic. I just looked at her. Aesthetic. A 16-year-old's party has an aesthetic that can be destroyed by a confection. The world has officially gone mad. So, let me get this straight, I said, leaning forward. You're suing for $5,000 because you didn't like the shade of pink on a cake? It's about the emotional distress, she insisted. My daughter, Brittany, was mortified. Her friends were snickering. The pictures are ruined. Her one special day, a memory she was supposed to cherish forever, is now a monument to tacky pink frosting. I turned my head slowly to Mr. Henderson. Sir, what do you have to say about this monument to tacky pink frosting? He cleared his throat, holding up a piece of paper. He was nervous, but his hands were steady. The hands of a man who works. Your Honor, this is the order form. Miss Dubois signed it herself. It says, and I quote, 4-tier vanilla cake with buttercream frosting. Light pink. That's what I made. I even have a photo of the cake before it was delivered. He handed the photo to Bird, who passed it to me. I looked at it. It was a perfectly nice-looking cake. It was, in fact, light pink. Maybe it wasn't the exact shade that existed in Miss Dubois's fantasy world, but it was light pink. Looks pink to me, I said, dropping the photo on my desk. And it looks light. Case closed. No, she screeched. That picture doesn't capture the horrifying hue in person. It was an assault on the senses. An assault on the senses. I wanted to tell her what a real assault was. Did you eat the cake, Miss Dubois? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She hesitated. Well, yes, the guests ate it. And you? Did you eat it? I had a small piece, she admitted, through gritted teeth. And? Did you survive? Did you require medical attention after consuming the offensively colored pastry? That's not the point. That is exactly the point. I cut her off, my voice rising. The point is you ordered a cake. You received a cake. You and your guests ate the cake. Was there anything wrong with the taste of the cake? It was adequate, she sniffed. Adequate. So you ate the product and now you want your money back plus thousands of dollars for your distresses because the color wasn't plucked from your imagination. Is that the summary? You're trivializing my daughter's pain. No, ma'am, I said, my patient's evaporating like a puddle in the desert. I'm trivializing a frivolous lawsuit. You know what's pain? Getting evicted, losing your job, real problems. A pink cake is not a problem. It's a first world tantrum. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not understanding, not shame, pure, unfiltered rage. She was one of those people who had never been told no in her life, and she was not about to start today. She had brought the offending object with her. I could see the corner of a white cardboard box peeking out from under her plaintiff's table. She had brought the cake to court. The sheer nerve of it was almost impressive. I see you've brought the evidence, I said, gesturing towards the box. This should be good. She smiled, a tight, vicious little thing. Yes, Your Honor. I wanted you to see the horror for yourself. She placed the box on the table with a thud. This was no longer about a cake. This was about a woman who believed her whims were legally binding contracts. And she was about to learn the hard way that in my courtroom, common sense is the only law that matters. My gaze hardened. Let's see it then. Show me the $5,000 cake. She lifted the lid of the box with the kind of dramatic flourish you'd expect from a magician about to pull a rabbit out of a hat. There it was, the offending article. A square of cake, maybe a foot on each side, sitting on a cardboard base. It was a remnant, a survivor of the alleged Sweet 16 massacre. And it was unequivocally pink. A light, perfectly pleasant shade of pink. The frosting was a little smeared on one side, probably from her dramatic journey to my courtroom. I stared at the cake. Then I stared at her. This is it? I asked, my voice flat. This is the $5,000 catastrophe? Look at it, she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. It's practically neon. It's cheap. It's what you'd get at a discount grocery store. I leaned forward, peering at the confection. Ma'am, I've seen cheap. I've adjudicated cases over things that would make your hair, which is already defying gravity, stand on end. This is a piece of cake. It's not an international incident. I turned to Bird. Bird, does this cake look like a catastrophe to you? Bird, bless his soul, kept a straight face. It looks like cake, Judge. Exactly, I snapped, turning back to Miss Dubois. It looks like a cake that someone paid for, received, and served to their guests. Did you provide Mr. Henderson with a color sample? A paint chip? A swatch of fabric from your daughter's aesthetically crucial dress? She sputtered. I described it. I used very specific words. I said blush, delicate. I shouldn't have to provide a sample. A true artist would have understood my vision. My vision. I felt a headache forming behind my eyes. A baker is not a true artist in the way you mean. He's a craftsman. He works with flour and sugar. Not your vision. He's not a psychic. You say light pink. You get light pink. You want Pantone Color 705C. You bring him the swatch for Pantone Color 705C. It's not complicated. Toddlers understand this concept. This is an insult, she said, her hands balling into fists. He should have known. Known what? The inner workings of your mind? Let's talk about the delivery. The cake arrives at your home. You open the box. You see this color that you claim has destroyed your life. What did you do? I was shocked. I didn't ask for your emotional reaction. I asked what you did. Did you tell the delivery person, I'm sorry, this is the wrong color. Please take it back? A flicker of hesitation. Well, no. The guests were about to arrive. I couldn't have a party with no cake. Ah, there it is. I pounced. So, confronted with this hideous, garish, disgusting object, you didn't reject it. You didn't call the bakery and complain. You accepted it. You put it on display. You served it to your daughter and her friends. You and your guests consumed the evidence. I leaned back in my chair, letting the facts hang in the air. You can't have it both ways, Miss Dubois. You can't accept and consume a product and then decide you don't want to pay for it. The world doesn't work that way. Your world might, but this courtroom doesn't. He ruined my party, she screeched, pointing at Mr. Henderson, who looked like he'd just been accused of treason. No, you did, I said, my voice cutting through her theatrics. You decided a shade of pink was more important than your daughter's birthday. You decided to throw a tantrum and drag this man, who probably works harder in one day than you have in the last decade, into court over frosting. You owe him an apology. That was the moment. I saw it in her eyes. The complete and total breakdown of her entitled worldview. I had not just disagreed with her. I had invalidated her reality. I had called her ridiculous. And in her world, there is no greater crime. Her face, which had been a mask of indignation, contorted into something genuinely ugly, pure, venomous rage. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the plaintiff's table. You think this is funny? She hissed, her voice low and trembling. You think you can just sit up there and mock me? I'm not mocking you, ma'am, I said, my tone dangerously calm. I'm telling you the truth. Your case has no merit. It is dismissed. Judgment for the defendant. I banged the gavel, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes were locked on the box with the leftover cake. A strange, twisted smile spread across her lips. I'll show you, she whispered, a chilling sound in the quiet courtroom. I'll show you the horror. And then, in a movement that was shockingly fast, she reached into the box. She didn't grab a piece. She scooped up the entire 1-foot square slab of frosting and vanilla sponge. Her manicured claws dug into the soft pastry. For a split second, nobody moved. It was like a tableau of stupidity. Bird took a step forward, his training kicking in, but he was too far away. Mr. Henderson just stared, his mouth agape. And I watched, my mind working with cold clarity as she drew her arm back. This woman was not just going to make a point. She was about to commit an act of such profound, idiotic disrespect that it would be talked about for years. She was about to throw the cake at me. Time seemed to slow down the way it does right before a car crash. I saw the muscles in her arm tense. I saw the unhinged glee in her eyes. I saw a glob of pink buttercream dislodge from the main mass and fall onto the pristine floor of my courtroom, a harbinger of the chaos to come. In that fraction of a second, I didn't feel fear. I felt a surge of cold, focused anger. This wasn't just an assault on me. It was an assault on the bench, on the entire system of justice she had come to for a resolution she didn't like. She was a child throwing a tantrum in the supermarket. Only her tantrum involved a projectile pastry and a federal courtroom. She let out a guttural scream, a sound of pure frustration, and launched the cake. It sailed through the air like a poorly thrown, sugary frisbee, spinning slightly, shedding crumbs and bits of frosting like a disintegrating comet. It was heading directly for my face. I didn't flinch. I didn't duck. I didn't even blink. I just sat there, my eyes locked on hers, my expression unyielding. Let her do it. Let everyone in this room, on this camera, in this country, see exactly who and what she was. A spoiled, out-of-control brat who couldn't handle being told she was wrong. The cake hit the plexiglass shield in front of my bench with a wet, sickening splat. Pink frosting exploded outwards, smearing across the clear barrier in a starburst of sugar and butter. The sponge cake itself, having lost all structural integrity, slid down the plexiglass, leaving a thick, greasy trail. It landed on the top of my desk with a soft, defeated thud. A single pink sugar rose, a survivor of the initial serving, rolled off the edge and bounced once on the floor. Silence, a profound, absolute silence, filled the courtroom. No one breathed. No one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the overhead lights. Everyone, from Bird to the bailiffs to the cameramen, was frozen, staring at the Rorschach test of pink frosting separating me from the plaintiff. I slowly lowered my gaze from the smeared plexiglass to the woman who had thrown it. The manic rage had vanished from her face, replaced by a dawning, slack-jawed horror. The kind of look a person gets when the adrenaline wears off and they realize they've just driven their car into a swimming pool. She was breathing in short, shallow gasps. Her bejeweled hand still held aloft, now empty and trembling slightly. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. I let the silence stretch, letting her stew in the magnificent stupidity of her actions. I could feel the weight of every camera lens in the room focused on me, waiting for the explosion. They were going to be disappointed. I don't explode, I dissect. Finally, I spoke. My voice was quiet. Not a yell, not a scream. It was a low, chillingly calm tone that cut through the silence like a scalpel. Well, I said, my eyes never leaving her face. That was a choice. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Ma'am, I continued in that same unnervingly quiet voice. In all my years on the bench, I have been called many things. I have been yelled at. I have been threatened. But I have never, until this moment, had a litigant express their displeasure with my ruling via baked goods. I picked up my gavel, my movements deliberate. You came into this courtroom seeking $5,000 for a cake whose color you found displeasing. I gestured with the gavel towards the mess on the plexiglass on my desk. And you have just committed assault on a judicial officer, contempt of court, and destruction of public property. And let me tell you, the bill for that is going to be a lot more than $5,000. Her face went pale, the garish makeup standing out like a cartoon mask. I didn't, she stammered. I was so angry. Don't care, I cut her off, my voice turning to ice. Your feelings are irrelevant. Your actions are what matter. And your actions, Miss Dubois, have just brought you a world of trouble you cannot even begin to comprehend. I turned my gaze to the two bailiffs who were now flanking her, no longer standing passively at the back of the room. They looked at me, awaiting the order. Bailiffs, I said, my voice resonating with an authority that left no room for argument. Take Miss Dubois into custody. Book her on every charge that applies. I want her to spend the night in a place where the decor is cinder block gray. Let's see how she likes that aesthetic. Her eyes went wide with genuine panic. No, please. Your Honor, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. Yes, it was. I agreed. My expression is hard as granite. A very, very expensive mistake. You're done here. Your case was over when I dismissed it. Your day in court has just turned into your night in jail. Get her out of my sight. The bailiffs each took one of her arms. The fight went out of her instantly. She went limp, the reality of the situation finally crashing down on her. The woman who walked in demanding $5,000 for hurt feelings was being dragged out in handcuffs. The last thing I saw was her face streaked with tears that were carving paths through her foundation, a mask of utter disbelief. She had played a stupid game, and she had just won the stupidest prize of all. As they hauled her away, a low murmur went through the gallery. I banged my gavel once, a sharp, deafening crack. Order! The room fell silent again. My eyes fell on Mr. Henderson, the baker. He was standing there, his order form still clutched in his hand, looking at the smeared frosting, at the empty space where Miss Dubois had been, his face a perfect picture of shell-shocked vindication. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice returning to its normal, no-nonsense tone. He jumped, startled. Yes, Your Honor? You're a good baker, I said, looking at the wreckage of his creation. That cake held together remarkably well in midair. A small, uncertain smile touched Mr. Henderson's lips. It was the first time I'd seen him look anything other than terrified. Thank you, Judge. I use a good amount of butter. I can tell, I said, gesturing to the greasy slide mark on the plexiglass. You're free to go, sir. You don't owe anyone anything. She owes you for the cake. Send her a bill. and add a surcharge for, let's call it aggravation. He nodded, a look of profound relief washing over him. He folded his order form, the crinkling of the paper sounding loud in the quiet room. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. He turned and walked out of the courtroom, a man who had entered under a cloud of nonsense and was now leaving with his good name and his recipe intact. The moment he was gone, I let out a long, slow breath. Bard came forward, a roll of paper towels in his hand. He's always prepared. He started to wipe at the plexiglass, but I held up a hand. Leave it, Bard, for now. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. I want the next litigant to see it, I said. Let it serve as a warning. This is what happens when you let your emotions override your common sense. This is what happens when you think the rules don't apply to you. He nodded, understanding completely. Whatever you say, Judge. I stood up and walked around the bench, careful to avoid the shrapnel of sponge cake on the floor. I looked at the mess. It was ridiculous. A grown woman, a mother, had thrown a cake in a court of law because she didn't get her way. It would be funny if it wasn't so pathetic. What kind of example was she setting for that 16-year-old daughter of hers? That if you don't like a decision, you respond with violence and disrespect? I felt a flash of pity for the girl, Brittany. She didn't just have to live with the memory of a Pepto-Bismol cake. She had to live with a mother who thought that was a reasonable response. I picked up the little pink sugar rose that had rolled onto the floor. It was perfectly formed, each petal delicate. Mr. Henderson was a craftsman, all right. He'd taken pride in his work, only to have it literally thrown back in his face. I placed the sugar rose on my desk, a small, sweet monument to the absurdity of the day. All right, Bird, I said, my voice all business again. Let's take a 15-minute recess. I want this cleaned up. I want every trace of frosting and foolishness gone before the next case. And find out what they charged her with. I want a copy of that report on my desk. Yes, Judge. As the crew came in to deal with the aftermath, I retreated to my chambers. I took off my robe, the one that now felt slightly spattered with the ghost of buttercream, and sat down at my desk. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a familiar weariness. It wasn't the workload that tired me out. It was the stupidity, the sheer, relentless, inventive stupidity of people. I thought about Miss Dubois, sitting in a holding cell. The shock would be wearing off, replaced by a cold, hard reality. She'd have to make a phone call. She'd have to explain to her husband or her lawyer or whoever that she was in jail. Not for a noble cause, not for protesting an injustice, but for assaulting a judge with a piece of her daughter's sweet 16 cake. The humiliation would be a life sentence, far more punishing than whatever fine or community service the criminal court would eventually hand down. And the story would get out. It was too bizarre, too insane to remain contained. Entitled Woman Throws Cake at Judge Judy. I could already see the headlines. She'd be a meme by morning, a cautionary tale for anyone who thought a tantrum was a valid legal strategy. She came to court seeking validation for her pettiness and instead achieved a kind of viral infamy. There's a certain justice in that. My phone buzzed. It was a text from one of the producers. You okay? I typed back a simple response. Peachy. A few minutes later, Bird knocked on my door. All cleaned up, Judge. And I have the preliminary report. He handed me a sheet of paper. I scanned it. Assault, contempt, malicious mischief. They weren't messing around. Her monument to tacky pink frosting was now a rap sheet. Good, I said, handing the paper back. Let's get back out there. What's next? A dispute between two neighbors, Bird said, over a hedge. Of course. From cakes to hedges, the parade of petty grievances never ends. I stood up and put my robe back on. It was my armor. As I walked back towards the courtroom, I glanced at the small sugar rose still sitting on my desk. Mr. Henderson made it. Miss Dubois threw it. And I was the one left to make sense of it all. I stepped back out onto the bench. The courtroom was spotless. The plexiglass gleamed. There was no sign of the chaos that had erupted just minutes before. It was as if it never happened, but it did. And I had a feeling Miss Tiffany Dubois would be reminded of that fact for a very, very long time. Next case! I called out, my voice booming through the room. The work continues. The stupidity never sleeps, and neither do I. The next two people who walked in looked like a parody of mismatched neighbors. The plaintiff, a Mr. Gable, was a man wound tighter than a grandfather clock. He had a ruler in his shirt pocket and a look on his face that suggested he just discovered a typo in the dictionary. The defendant, Miss O'Connell, was his polar opposite. She wore a flowing skirt, had paint under her fingernails, and looked at the world with the serene, slightly unfocused gaze of someone who might name her houseplants. All right, Mr. Gable, I started picking up the new file. You are suing Miss O'Connell for, let's see, property damage, emotional distress, and the cost of a new lawnmower, totaling, once again, the maximum of $5,000. What did she do? Run it over with a steamroller? Worse, Your Honor, he said, his voice quivering with a very particular kind of suburban rage. She has a tree, a mulberry tree, and it sheds. I blinked. It sheds. You mean like a tree does? Leaves, twigs, that sort of thing? Berries, Your Honor. Thousands of them. They fall onto my pristine Kentucky bluegrass. They stain my new Italian flagstones. They attract birds who then leave their droppings. It is a relentless purple assault on my property. For one wild, insane moment, I had a vision of the mulberry tree lifting itself from the ground and hurling its berries at the plexiglass shield. A purple assault. At least it would be a different color. I pushed the thought away. And the lawnmower? I was mowing, he explained, and I ran over a patch of these wretched berries. The wheels became slick with their pulp. The mower slid, went out of control, and crashed into my prize-winning garden gnome, decapitated him. It was a scene of utter carnage, a decapitated garden gnome. My day was officially a circus. I looked over at Miss O'Connell. She had a dreamy smile on her face. Is this true, ma'am? Do you own a tree that weaponizes its fruit against garden gnomes? It's a beautiful old tree, Your Honor, she said, her voice soft. It was there long before Mr. Gable moved in. The birds love it. The berries make a wonderful jam. Did you offer to help him clean up the berries? I asked. I offered him a jar of the jam, she said sweetly. Mr. Gable made a sound like a deflating balloon. She mocks me with the very instruments of my torture. Okay, I've heard enough, I said, holding up a hand. The parallels were almost poetic. One person obsessed with a specific color, another with a pristine lawn, both believing their personal preferences were legally enforceable, both willing to drag someone else into court to validate their neuroses. But where Miss Dubois was a creature of pure, vicious entitlement, these two were just silly. They were neighbors who had forgotten how to talk to each other. Mr. Gable, I said, leaning forward, let me explain something to you. It's called life. In life, trees have berries. Birds fly. Sometimes gnomes get broken. You don't get $5,000 because you have to rake your lawn. You don't get to sue your neighbor because you don't like the kind of tree she has. That's not how the world works. But my property values, he started, are you selling your house tomorrow? I cut him off. No? Then it's irrelevant. Did the tree's roots crack your foundation? Did a branch fall and crush your car? No. You're complaining about fruit. Fruit! I turned to Miss O'Connell. And you. While you have the right to your tree, you live in a community. Your neighbor is clearly unhappy. Did it ever occur to you to offer to pay for a net to catch the berries or to help him sweep them up? Offering him jam is like offering a drowning man a glass of water. It's tone deaf. She seemed genuinely surprised. I suppose I could do that. You suppose you could, I repeated. This entire dispute could have been solved with a rake, a garbage bag, and a 30-second conversation. Instead, you're both here, wasting your time, wasting the taxpayers' money, and wasting my time, which I assure you is the most valuable commodity in this room. The image of the pink frosting, a smear of pure irrationality, came back to me. That was rage. That was malice. This was just a failure to communicate. It was foolish, but it wasn't evil. Here's my ruling, I announced. My voice firm. Case dismissed. You, Mr. Gable, are getting nothing. Go buy a new gnome, maybe one with a helmet. And you, Miss O'Connell, are going to go home and be a better neighbor. Go talk to the man. Find a solution. Or don't. I don't care. But don't ever bring a problem into my courtroom that could be solved with a broom. Are we clear? They both nodded, looking chastened. Good. Get out. They scurried away, and as they left, I saw Miss O'Connell whisper something to Mr. Gable. He didn't answer, but he didn't storm off either. Maybe there was hope for them. It was a small thing, but it was a victory for common sense. And it put the earlier incident into stark relief. The world is full of petty squabbles and ridiculous disagreements. That's just human nature. But there is a line between being a difficult neighbor and being a menace. A line between filing a foolish lawsuit and physically assaulting the court. Miss Dubois hadn't just crossed that line. She had pole vaulted over it using a cake as the pole. And in doing so, she had reminded me of the purpose of this room. It's not just to solve disputes over berries and cakes. It's to uphold that line. It's to reinforce the idea that actions have consequences, that society has rules, and that when you break them, you will be held accountable. No matter how special you think you are. Bert approached the bench. The DA's office called. Judge, they're moving forward with the charges against Miss Dubois. Her arraignment is tomorrow morning. Good, I said, a grim satisfaction settling over me. Let the system do its work. They also sent this over, he said, handing me a still image printed from the high-definition courtroom camera. It was a perfect, crystal-clear shot, frozen in time. It captured the exact moment of impact. The cake exploding against the plexiglass, the shock wave of frosting rippling outwards, a single crumb suspended in midair. In the background, my own face was visible through the clear parts of the shield, impassive and unmoving. It was an incredible photograph, a picture of sanity staring down insanity. You know, Bard, I said, looking at the image, this might be the most expensive piece of cake in history.
The courtroom commentary here is not really about blindness. It is about evidence, accountability, and the danger of turning compassion into leverage. The judge's central point is that a legal system must distinguish genuine disability from performative suffering without mocking real impairment. Karen Whitmore arrives with a highly curated image of vulnerability, but the case unravels through accumulated inconsistencies. Witness statements, surveillance observations, social media records, a forged medical letter, improper cane use, and finally a reflexive catch of a thrown tennis ball that contradicts her claim of total blindness. Barbara Chen is presented as the opposite type of character. A small business owner who initially accommodated the claimed disability, spent money and emotional energy trying to help, and then spent months questioning her own decency when the story stopped adding up. The commentary's strongest argument is that fraud of this kind harms more than the immediate victim. It erodes trust in accommodations, benefits, and legitimate disability claims, making future requests for help harder for truly impaired people. The judge also emphasizes process over theatrics. The tennis ball is memorable, but it is framed as the final confirmation, not the foundation of the ruling. What mattered legally was the pattern of evidence, the forged documentation, and the repeated contradictions. The ending reinforces a broader principle. Compassion is a virtue, but courts exist because compassion without verification can be exploited. Barbara leaves with her reputation restored, the claim dismissed, legal costs partially reimbursed, and the matter referred for criminal review. Karen's collapse is treated not as entertainment, but as the exposure of a constructed scheme. In American English terms, the message is simple. Sympathy is not proof. Skepticism is not cruelty when facts justify it. And the most humane thing a court can do is protect real disability rights. By refusing to reward a counterfeit claim,